Well, it's interesting because people don't understand the systemic processes that have been put in place to make it look like the black community is doing better than it is. And one of that was strategically manipulating black women to manipulate the entire black community. So by letting black women believe that they're doing better and that feminism has benefited them, it makes pressure on black men harder and therefore the divide greater and our ability to unify less. So by, giving us access to scholarships at greater rates than black men, that we already have greater graduation rates than black men, and then the access to jobs, is that the divide is so great we're unable to unify because now we think because we've done it that the black man should too.
Well, look, I mean, this is part of the data that you constantly discuss, and I think other economists and sociologists have as well. The growing rate of incarceration means that those people, when they come out, those black male bodies, are no longer viable in terms of getting middle class aspirant or even living wage jobs. So that drives them down. The kinds of wages and the kinds of jobs that they're going to be able to do, they're going to compete in many cases with migrant labor, right? The jobs that we assume that nobody actually wants. That's who they're competing with because they can't get stable, normalized employment with other people in this country. So what does that mean? That means that because they're poor and fighting for resources, increased deviance, selling drugs, doing the things that people outside of the labor participation have to do to survive. And then that puts them back in the incarceration system. Then they're killed. High rates of homicide. This is all a cycle that used to. My suggestion is when you look over the history of white patriarchal societies, and this is clearly explained in social dominance theory, this has been explained in global South masculinities, you're going to target racialized males. So from slavery to Jim Crow to the mid-20th century, you see the repetition of systems that are designed to make sure that black men do not excel politically, that black men do not excel economically, and that any black man that steps outside of his proverbial place within the society, be it education, be it as a leader, whatever, he is met with death. So I'm suggesting that there's an anti-black misandry driving what we're seeing in Chetty's finding.
I believe we do need it, and there needs to be a movement for it, but the honest truth is that black women are not willing to give black men. Basically, they're not willing to subjugate or give up their black feminism, which isn't actually real. Again, the reason that black women are given the access is because they're more likely to be subordinate to participate in white culture. And so they're just not willing to. Like, black women would have to be willing to give up their spot for a black man to go, and they're just, our culture is showing that they're not willing to right now. Ideally, yes, it needs to happen to give them back power and to make up the gap, but to speak frankly, in my experience, black women are not willing to do that.
That's true, right? Like that's true, right? The way that preferences are set up, and I'll tell you from my personal experience in the academy, I've been on committees where people have said we're not going to hire other black men, even if they're more qualified or come out to be the top one or two candidates for jobs, because we prefer black women. But again,
Right.
Oh no, I'm saying I've had experiences in the academy where black male candidates come out as being listed the top one or two candidates and have still been refused because our conversations about them needing to be refused because they were black men is quite popular. But again, this fits into to keep out black men. That's not the power that black people themselves hold. That's how white supremacies try to utilize different bodies to disadvantage black men in the kind of society that says black men are deviants, black men are undesirable, and black men are ultimately criminals.
More, or if let's even look at it like this: 1 in 5 black men, according to the data reports in 2016, didn't work. 1 in 3 went to jail. If the quality of black man is very rare, should there be some active participation in seeking out and pursuing that quality black man that isn't happening right now? In mass, I should say.
Black men are at the bottom of the economic ladder. That's why I won't stop being a helicopter parent to my black son. I'm the mother of a black man, and I'm worried about his financial future. My son will turn 20 at the end of the month, and there is one thing that is causing him a great deal of stress. He's concerned about finding the right career path and making enough money to live well. By any reasonable measure, my son should have an upper hand in life. He's the product of a two-parent household. He lived all his life in upper-income neighborhoods. He had attended private school. Both my husband and I have advanced degrees. We earn good money. But I've always known he has a harder road to walk. Even as a toddler, I began to see the differences in how my son was treated. Where his sisters were given grace for mistakes, he was handled more harshly. His responses. Although my son is on the autism spectrum, he has always done well in school. Yet his ability to succeed was constantly questioned. Now comes a report that further feeds my concerns for my son. In 99% of neighborhoods in the United States, black boys grow up to earn less than white boys who are raised in families with comparable income. According to a study from the Equality of Opportunity Project, even black boys who come from wealthy families living in the same block still earn less as adults than white boys with similar upbringings. When we compare the outcomes of black and white men who grow up in two-parent families with levels of similar income, wealth, and education, we continue to find that black men still have substantially lower incomes in adulthood, the report said. My heart dropped. Here's confirmation from groundbreaking work on the economic gap between black and white males. The paper is called Race and Economic Opportunity in the United States, an intergenerational perspective by Rod Chetty of Stanford University, Nathaniel Hendren of Harvard University, and Maggie R. Jones and Sonia R. Porter, both from the U.S. Census Bureau. The team analyzed rates of upward and downward mobility across generations using census data on 20 million children and their parents. Researchers found that black children born to lower income parents have difficulty improving their economic status compared with similarly situated whites. The gap is substantial. For children in the bottom rung of household income, there is a 2.5% chance of them rising to the top tier of household income, compared to 10.6% for whites. But the most startling result from the result was this: growing up in a high-income family doesn't provide insulation from income disparities for black boys. So why is there a gap? Could it be because the boys are more likely to come from a single-parent household? No, marital status played only a limited role in explaining the disparity. What about ability? Researchers dismissed this too. They found that considering what their parents earn, black women have incomes and wage rates comparable to white women, despite having much lower test scores. This, the researchers said, suggests that tests do not accurately measure differences in ability. If it's not a matter of parental marriage or education level, or household wealth or test scores, then what? It may be environmental, according to the research. These findings suggest that reducing the black-white income gap will require efforts whose impacts cross neighborhoods and class lines and increase upward mobility specifically for black men. My son is a sophomore at the University of Maryland at Baltimore County, a school that boasted a great reputation for academics long before it was the darling of the nation for becoming the first men's number 16 seed to ever be the number 1 seed in the March Madness basketball tournament. UMBC President Freeman A. Hrabowski III has for decades made it his mission to help his male African American students flourish. He sees them as his own sons, and he's pioneered scholarship programs for them with strong mentoring components. The structural racism problem is real. Hrabowski, author of Beating the Odds, Raising Academically Successful African American Males. Black males at every level are at risk of not doing well. This should be a wake-up call for everybody. For my part, I always ignored people who said that I needed to step back as my son got older. Nonsense. The odds are against him, and too much is at stake for us to watch from a distance as our black boys sink or swim. I have regular talks with his college counselor, and together with my son, we've developed a team approach to make sure he excels. Call me a helicopter parent if you want, but this research proves that our black boys, including my son, can't afford a hands-off approach. And this is from Michelle Singletary, columnist at the Washington Post. Now, this is another take on the New York Times article and the paper that was done by Chetty and his team from the Census Bureau. And really, it's just admitting that racism is still alive and well. And just like the Third Reich, it's gone underground. It's not in the obvious position. The noose around your neck and the shackles around your feet are not physical anymore. They're financial. As in the companion piece by the Brookings Institute said that at the very minimum, 30 to 40% of black boys are born into poverty. So that means that black boys that are born into poverty have little or no chance to escape their surroundings or their economic station. And the ones that do only enter into, at best, the lower middle class. So these are your systemic Pookies and these are your systemic Ray Rays. And then you wonder why there are so many. And you wonder how come we keep creating them at an ever increasing rate. As this shows, this stuff didn't come out of nowhere. The study showed that it didn't matter that you had a 2-parent household. It didn't matter that you had a good education. You're still under the thumb of this system. It is what it is. It's sobering news, but the thing is, it finally confirms what everybody's been saying for the last 60 years, hell, the last 100 years. And it's staring everybody squarely in the face. And it confirms something that I've said for the past 3 years, or maybe basically 4 years, really, about black feminism and black feminists being in league with white feminists. This just confirms it. And as you heard in the previous clip before the article, it's something that our educated sisters already know and they accept, because those are the ones working in HR. Those are the ones that hear the stories. And they whisper it to each other. But they make excuses just like the white women do, or the white men do. So I'm curious, with these studies that are coming out, I'm sure there's going to be more of them, that literally prove what we already know. Will that spur the black community to do something different? Because as this proves, even if you do get married, even if you do get into the upper class or even the upper middle class, that your son or your sons still have to walk through the same gauntlet that you did. And as this lady says, she is a woke black woman. She's not woke because she particularly cares about black men. You can tell that. She cares about her black son, which is something I always say, because I know that black women probably, if they haven't done already, will not particularly care about black men, but they will care about their black son, which is the very least they could do. If you really care about your people, or care about your people as much as you say you do, especially when you're pounding black men over racism and how come they're not doing anything. It's also something else for black men to consider, that just because you've made it, you can't relax, because you still have to prepare your sons and your male relatives to walk through this gauntlet. Because America is a minefield for a black man. One false step and it will blow up his life. It's something you know, every other black man that has gone before you also knows. Denying it is not an option. Say that again. Denying it is not an option. America has never been a level playing field. Even for the lower class white boys, it's never been an American playing field, a level playing field. But with that, I'm going to jump off of here. More logs on the fire, more grist for the mill. This is BGS out, and I will see you guys on the next one.